A potential roofing material supplier suggests a different roofing material than the architect had been considering, and is an inducement to get them to try something new, is willing to provide the architect a 10% return after the material has been procured by the GC. The architect should do what? We have a couple different possibilities here. First one is inform the building code official as to their plans to use the newer material. B is discuss with the GC whether the material meets the needs of the project. C is use the initial material only. D is review the materials for adherence to the needs of the project and the project budget, and propose a material that best meets the needs without accepting financial return. So, all right, A, inform the building code official that you're going to be using the newer material. That's a reasonable answer. If you are, in fact, going to be using the newer material, A would certainly be a reasonable thing to do. B, discuss with the GC whether the material meets the needs of the project. Well, that's also a reasonable thing to do. The GC probably has some opinions about it. It would be useful to know about pricing and about a bunch of other aspects that the GC would have their finger on. So B, also fairly reasonable. So far we're not really putting anything out of possibility. C, use the initial material. Well, that's certainly doable. There's nothing wrong with sticking with your initial game plan. So that also is sort of plausible. But there's one key aspect to what's being asked in the question that's going to make all of those kind of moot. And when we look at D, what we're going to realize is that D is the only one that hits on that one particular aspect. So review the two materials for adherence to the needs of the project and the project budget. So it's mentioning both the needs of the project, i.e. the durability, the health, safety, and welfare issues, all of those kinds of issues, but also the project budget. But mostly it's going to say at the end here, so you choose the one that makes the most sense without accepting a financial return. This is a key thing. D is absolutely the correct answer. There are many different, even related professions that allow you to sort of play a little fast and loose with when you're procuring materials about who's paying for what and whether you get a little kickback or not. But the way this is written, this is clearly a kickback to the architect for choosing a particular roofing material. And if you're an interior decorator and you get to sort of bill at the list price, but get a special discount, and so you're making a little extra money, like nobody's going to throw you in jail because you're an interior decorator. It has a different relationship to the idea of profession. It's there's not the same expected level of concern about the health, safety, and welfare of the public. It's also it depends on the contract and a few of the different situations, but certain contractors have the ability to be able to do things like that. But an architect can never accept a kickback in this kind of situation. There is no sort of ethical way to do that. And that's because an architect is considered a professional and has a certain ethical relationship. And that ethical relationship, it would be not reasonable to ask an architect to put themselves in the position to be choosing between making more money or protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the public. So like in this particular example, roofing material, like if it's a EPDM versus a PVC or something, you know, there's probably not a lot of health, safety, and welfare worries in that situation. It's probably more just durability or appropriateness to the job at hand, and obviously the budget. But you can't let it start. You can't just because this particular one isn't an example where the health, safety, and welfare of the public hasn't been compromised. You just can't let it start. So the rules will always say that the architects cannot take money directly in that way because it is just an ethical problem that has to do with that protection.
And just to just as a reference, you may have mentioned this, but the kind of the, I guess the standard for this is articulated, correct me if I'm wrong, in the AIA Handbook for Professional Practice, right? That's kind of where we're getting this from?
Yeah, there's a whole ethical construct that you can actually find right on the AIA website, but
Yeah,
it's
good point. That's right.
it's also pretty clearly put into the Handbook of Professional Practice, and it's a pretty extensive thing. There's a lot of different topics that show up on there. This is one of many. There's also issues about how to compete with each other, how to what it means to be a professional, all of that. There is a kind of interesting relationship between the AIA in this situation and the actual sort of governing body that licenses each of the individual candidates, and that the licensure is actually done by state. So each state has their own licensing board, and they're the ones who have the actual control over the licensure. But every one of the ones in the United States will have something that's very, very similar, specific on this topic, it's very similar, but pretty much will adopt the entire ethical sort of construct of that shows up in the AIA documents.
So that one is a little sort of cheat one. It's really just trying to lull you with a bunch of information. And the thing you're supposed to notice is the fact that it's talking about the return after the material was procured. That's clearly a kickback.
You should know that. You should be proud to know that very, very, very few people got this wrong.
Yes, good job. And just to put it into context, like we're saying, this is really about kind of running a firm. This is part of what the point of questions like this would be, first of all, to see if you know that, but it's also just trying to reinforce that there are codes of conduct, there is an ethical structure that you should be aware of, that if you're working for a firm and you're doing CD sets or 3D models in BIM or something like that, there's sort of you're not really expected to understand all of the code of conduct issues and how the contracts are going to relate to ethical issues and things like that. But if you're starting a practice, you absolutely are expected to understand what those issues are. And so this is one of those where the exam is partly in place here to test your knowledge on these things, and it's also partly in place to sort of put a flag in front of you to say, hey, don't forget, this is an issue you need to know about in order to run your firm.
And for those of you who are ready to start preparing for the ARE, and if you're already an AIA member, you can use coupon code 32917PMYT to get a 15% discount for the entire duration of your ARE exam prep membership. And then finally, leave a comment below the video to let us know what you think. Share any suggestions you may have. I promise we'll read every word that you write and use them to tune our next episodes. So thanks for watching.